Hello, it's Jack Tutor here of Attention Magazine. Welcome to Crucial Listening, the podcast where I speak with musicians and sound artists about 3 albums that are important to them. My guest this time is Mira Martin-Gray, an experimental musician from Toronto, who has a new album, Hen's Teeth, on Rat Drifting, Eric Chenau's label. It's a record that swerves upon the spectrum of songcraft and improvisation. You have the first half, which has these beautiful, very intimate songs for an array of acoustic instruments plus Mira's own electronics, and Mira's voice, as well as this hush, very carefully poised. The lyrics center, for the most part, from my side anyway, seem to center on the charms of day-to-day life, memories, things that feel very small scale, kind of incidental, and it gives the improvisations a very casual conversation, mid-afternoon, lounging in your living room with friends kind of vibe. And the second half spills into these extended improvised pieces, as though the more abrasive electronics of the first half have introduced a hairline fracture that then busts open the whole record in the second half. The fact that the record has this spectrum and migrates from structure to improvisation in this way feels really apt for Mira. Her output is all over the map. She did a dance record on the SH-101 for my label Hard Return. She's done stick control for the Air Drummer, which is centered on 808 samples on MIDI sequences beamed at a prepared snare drum. She's done loads of different bits, all of them really compelling. I know the one consistency is that I'm going to feel really buzzed when I hear one of Mira's records. Hen's Teeth is no exception. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. It was great to actually speak to Mira by voice, having conversed over emails for the past few years. Loved the records that she picked. This was a good time. So if you are enjoying the podcast and wish to support it, you can do so over at ko-fi.com/crucial listening. Donations there, one-off or monthly, will help support the outgoings associated with keeping the podcast ticking. Thank you for listening. Okay, this is Mira Martin-Gray on Crucial Listening.
And still can't seem to drift. The water, the earth, the sky, the cycle of day and night. The sun doesn't make mistakes.
Hello Mira, welcome to Crucial Listening.
Hi, Jack. Thanks for having me. Big fan of the pod.
Oh, thank you so much. It's lovely to have you on. I want to talk about your 3 important albums. I've had a lot of fun with those. Before we get to talking about them, I want to talk about your new album, which I've also been having a wonderful time with. It's called Hen's Teeth, and it's out on Eric Chenau's Rat Drifting label. So, I mean, I want to start by acknowledging the fact that I've been listening to your music for a few years now, and my primary interaction with your music has been stuff that is, broadly speaking, more towards like the abstract terrain, right? The release on Full Spectrum, Stick Control, also the release you put out for the label that I've been involved in, Hard Return, under Cypro. So I was aware that you made music that had more of a song-centric basis to it, but it's wonderful to really dive into it like this. So I wanted to ask you about these different facets of your output to begin with. I mean, how come you're round to releasing a record that consists of songs again? Did you ever stop making them? Like, how do all these components of your output and the directions you go in, how do they kind of coexist?
Yeah. Well, thanks for the kind words. I've definitely always been doing songs. For a while, I stopped playing the guitar entirely for like health reasons. And so a big part of my getting into like performing more abstract music was contingent on a necessary kind of basis. Although I was, interested in experimental music, I wasn't participating in it until I had to sort of stop being a songwriter, or I felt that I did. I wanted to take a break from it. And yeah, on this record, I really wanted to bridge that kind of divide between like, well, here's a song and here's some weird thing. Because it is kind of an artificial, divide sometimes. It's funny, like, we'll talk about like pieces rather than songs, right? Or compositions. And sometimes when you call something a song, it feels like, well, it's not quite a song, is it?
Right. Yeah.
So the original idea with this was to kind of weave it into a natural kind of tapestry of songs and sounds, and it ended up being more like, well, one side is song and one side is sound, quote unquote. One side is like the more sort of free improv stuff, and one side is the more writing chord progressions and singing, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I wanted to kind of make sense of the different facets of what I do and try to kind of, I don't know, prove to myself that it wasn't all like a totally fractured kind of psyche of a musician.
Nice. I'm really intrigued actually to ask about how you recorded these, because am I right from the text I gathered that everyone contributing, or there were multiple locations involved basically, and not sort of a not all you getting together in one room. So how did the songs, let's start with the songs, but how did they start out? How did they begin their life, and how did you go about bringing those into kind of like having a full band context? Because it sounds like wonderfully together and coherent. You'd never know that things
well,
were
so there are a couple songs. Well, there's one song. The first song is recorded in a room with everyone.
Right.
But the rest of them are kind of assembled piecemeal. And, part of that was like COVID concerns, obviously, blah, blah, blah. Part of that was also like, so, well, I'll answer your other question, which is like, where did they begin? And the answer is in different ways, different places. Some of them began as like poems or journal entry kind of things. So I would have like lyrics, and then I would sing to myself, shape it into a melody, harmonize it, like write the chord structure on the basis of the words. And then on some things, it was the other way around, where, I've got like some old bits and pieces of music that I want to make sense of and put together. And yeah, so when it came to putting it all together, I just got in touch with some of my, close friends and collaborators in the scene here in Toronto. And, I was lucky enough to be able to get a grant to pay them, which was good. And so some people have like nice home studio situations where, so it could be like, laying down pristine audio, and other people like recording a harmonica in their closet, or, and then I did end up going into a couple of like studios to do some, especially with the woodwinds on there, or in a studio. And yeah, that first track with the full sort of acoustic jazz band sound is in a semi-studio kind of situation.
Also, as well, I wanted to ask about the text scores. So there are a couple on Bandcamp that I can see. They seem like really lovely provocations for the people you're working with. So yeah, tell me about your relationship with text scores and how you landed on those instructions that appear on this record.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, Pauline Oliveros is kind of the text person for this kind of thing, and so obviously I've read her work on around that, and I also like took not a course, but like a little deep listening. I don't know. It wasn't a retreat or anything. It was just like a little couple hours with this woman, Anne Bourne, who's a great cellist and was a student of Pauline's. But yeah, I think it was kind of, the thought initially was that I was going to use a bunch of different text scores, give the musicians those, have them send me back whatever they do, and then weave in all of that stuff and like recompose it and like do all sorts of crazy Ableton stuff. And that just ended up being way too much work. But instead, it really worked out. I'm not like super fluent with traditional notation. Like I did actually use the pandemic as an opportunity to kind of reacquaint myself with that stuff that I've sort of forgotten since I initially learned it. So there was also like actual charts for certain things, but the text scores were just a way to direct without directing, just a gentle kind of way of establishing a mood and uniting musicians that are not in the same room with a kind of purpose, I guess.
You've touched on this, I think, in the answer to my first question, but the way the album is sequenced, I think, is really interesting as a listening experience, because you start obviously with this cluster of tracks that do fall under what we would traditionally say are songs. There are these hints of agitation within those structures, and then it kind of spills into the second half and these two elongated improvised pieces. So there's a lovely moment on the record where, and I can't remember the last lyric, it's to do with like a snowflake, isn't it, before it spills into the improv. It's got this lovely like way to kind of leave that area of the record and go into the next one. So I guess there are other ways you could have gone about it with sequencing. Like they could have been interspersed, you could have gone in and out, but I'm really attached to the way you've gone about it. So can you tell me about the considerations of sequencing the record like that and having that huge improv section at the end?
Yeah, I'm glad you find the sequence makes sense, because I definitely struggled with the sequencing. Because and I was thinking that maybe we'd have a song and then an instrumental and a song and an instrumental kind of vibe. Ultimately, I thought like some people like songs, some people like abstract music, and they don't necessarily want it interrupting their listening experience. Like just simply like, well, can my mom listen to this? She can only listen. She can listen to the first half. But I also I thought of it as like sets in a way, right? As well, like often you'll have like, oh, well, here's the first set and we'll come back for a second set and it might be a different vibe.
So the record, as I've said, is great. It's coming out on Eric Schnow's Rat Drifting, which is a lovely label as well. People, please check it out. I'll put the links in the show notes. And yeah, Mira, let's talk about your important records now. So one question I ask at this point is about how you thought about the word important when picking your list of records. So was there a way that you understood the word important in order to come up with the records that you did?
Yeah, this was important, right? Like there are a lot of records that have been important to me, as is obviously the case for any serious listener or musician. I didn't want to choose stuff that like I know everyone has heard and will like no one, like we can talk about like Sgt. Pepper's like I'm happy to do that, like we can just throw out all our prep and do that, but I just thought it wouldn't be that interesting. And there are other things that, like there's stuff that's been really, really meaningful to me, like Joni Mitchell's Blue or something, where it's like, what hasn't been said about it? You know what I mean?
Right, sure, yeah.
So I wanted to choose stuff that I have spent a lot of time with, but that like maybe somebody hasn't heard. So yeah, that was kind of my thought process.
Lovely. And on that, I hadn't heard any of these before actually, so that's a plus. So yeah, which one do you want to go for first, Mira?
Let's do chronological. I
Nice.
like systematic things.
Cool. I guess then, in terms of when it was recorded, I suppose
Yes.
we're going with Thelonious Monk Quartet with John Coltrane at Carnegie Hall,
Right.
recorded in 1957, released in 2005. So yeah, give me a little introduction as to why this one's important to you.
Okay, well, yeah, and you'll notice two of the records I chose are from 2005. So I guess that was a time when I was really doing a lot of important listening. But yeah, so the Monk, I mean, it's Thelonious Monk, obviously. This is, when I was first starting to get into jazz in high school, through just like being in the music program, and also through just like being online all the time and being able to like go on Demonoid and download torrents of like anything. So, you get your typical jazz starter pack, right? You get your Miles Davis and John Coltrane and stuff. And through looking about John Coltrane, I came across Thelonious Monk, and I got this record, which I didn't know was like this lost treasure that had only just come out that year.
Right. Wow.
So I listened to it, and it was, it's fabulous. It's a really good, like, hi-fi recording for a live recording from that time. And yeah, just listening to Thelonious Monk's compositions, they're very different from, say, like, I don't know, like typical like Charlie Parker style bebop kind of stuff, right? Like there's this real weird tonality, weird like symmetrical but slightly off kind of vibe, which I found really, really satisfying and interesting.
You could have, I guess, because of Monk's caliber, gone for like a straight up Monk record. Obviously the fact that Coltrane is on here is very interesting because there's not loads of documentation of them both together, and I think that was to do with like label business for the most part. But what is it about, say, like John Coltrane's presence on this record that, well, the rest of the band as well, but Coltrane, I guess, juts out, that made you pick this record rather than like a straight up Monk album?
Well, like this is the one that introduced me, right? So this is the first one I heard, and it just so happens that it's this interesting historical documentation of a short-lived collaboration. And yeah, but it is if you read Robin D.G. Kelly's book on Monk, it's a really interesting period. I recommend it in his career, because before this, he basically was banned from playing live, like prior to 1950. All through the 50s, like 52 to 57, he was not allowed to play in New York City because he lost his cabaret card for like bullshit charge. And so this is kind of his like comeback period, or the beginning of it, and he's like really on fire, like on the album. You listen to some of his later albums and they're a little bit more clunky, and obviously the clunkiness is part of what we like about his playing. But yeah, it's just, the band is really good. Like the drums are super loud, especially in the first set, which I like. And yeah, Coltrane's playing is good. It's not like, you can hear that he is still like working on his sound in a certain way. Like he sounds really, really good on Monk's Mood. I think he sounds really, really good on Epistrophe, which is my favorite track on the album. I don't know. It was just an album that I came across that I spent a lot of time with. I like this. Yeah, this is in high school, so I used it when I had an art project to like. We had to like make a photography slideshow and choose a piece of music to go with your photographs, and I chose this. I chose
cool.
Epistrophe, because I just love the drums, like the pitter-pattery sort of like super busy drums and the melody. And my classmate, like after it was over, was like, so like that's it, like where's the song, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's funny to think about, but like if you don't have that kind of foot in the door of this kind of music, it's like, what am I hearing? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
It made so much sense. It was very like beautiful and satisfying music to me, but then I would try to show it to people and they'd be like, and I just mean like jazz in general, to like friends of mine who were interested in like rock music or whatever. They'd be like, yeah, it's okay, you know.
Yeah, I find it fascinating as well, right? That you hear the crowd at the beginning and obviously at various points. I love that about jazz. Like, I haven't seen a lot of actual live jazz, but the whole notion of applauding mid-piece is just, I really like it. But it sounds like a sizable crowd, and this is like 1957, and you hear some of this stuff, and you're like, people are just getting off on this stuff in like the 50s. And you can play it to someone now, and they're like, "Whoa."
Yeah, whoa, this is a bit much for me, thank you. It's true. Well, yeah, and I think this recording, I think there were a bunch of other performances that night. It was sort of a showcase of jazz at Carnegie Hall, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
So that was kind of a big deal to have it not be in the clubs, but for it to be like presented as concert music. Which is kind of normal now, but yeah.
I mean, so I haven't spent loads of time with Monk. I've spent a lot of time with Coltrane. And I wanted to ask you about an observation I made about their interplay, which is amazing. Like, it felt like at a lot of occasions after Coltrane had finished a solo, which, because he's Coltrane, go on for like 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and you kind of get the sense that he's lost sense of how long they're going on. When Monk comes back in and plays a solo, it's like Coltrane is just on all the time, and then Monk will leave like 2-3 bars and not play anything at all. Like, we'll do one chord and then like really quick stabby chord and then stop and just leave all this space. It feels like a really, for someone who hasn't spent a lot of time with Monk, it feels like very, very much like a deliberate contrast to that complete maximalist occupation of space of Coltrane. But is
100%.
Is that a Monk thing, or is it more pronounced on this record?
No, I think that's a Monk thing. I think he definitely is someone who was kind of very interested in, you know, the space and, you know, these sort of rhythmic displacements. You know, the note doesn't come where you think it's going to come. And I think there's also like very much a teacher-student kind of thing happening in this, where it's like, all right, slow down.
Right.
So there could be some of that, but if you, I mean, yeah, he's not someone who plays 100 notes in a bar. Which I'm attracted to, because I can't do it either.
Right.
But so it's like, yeah, he knows what he's doing, and therefore it's okay for the rest of us.
And you discovered this back in when it came out, so that's 18 years ago now. How has your relationship with it changed? I mean, obviously you picked it now, so it's stuck about, but yeah, have you had a changing relationship with it as time has gone on?
With this particular record, yeah, I think, well, when asked about my important records, I was thinking, well, like, I need to choose some sort of jazz album that I was interested in a serious, prolonged way. So, but I thought this one might be something that people hadn't necessarily heard this particular recording. But how has my relationship with it changed? It's not like it's something that I've listened to like once a month every year since 2005 or anything.
Right, yeah.
I think how listening to it now as compared to then, I know all the tunes really well, and I've heard different recordings of them. I've read this 450-page autobiography, or not autobiography, biography of Monk. And I've spent a lot more time. And I guess I understand more of what he's doing now, musically, than I did when I first listened to it, when it was just oh, cool, this sounds weird, or it's now it's oh, okay, he's playing the whole tone scale here. Oh, okay, this is rubato, this is, a tritone, whatever.
Mira, let's go to your second important record. So where are we at? Oh, Owen Pallett, right? That's the next one. Was it released as Final Fantasy? I can't remember.
Yes, it was released as Final Fantasy Has a Good Home in 2005. Cool. And was just re-released with a really, really nice remaster. His first two full-lengths and his EPs from the Final Fantasy era have been given really nice remasters that just came out, and I encourage everyone to listen to those.
Nice. So, yeah, give me a little introduction as to why this one is important.
So, what I would say to introduce this is being Canadian. Okay, being Canadian, you're growing up and you hear about Celine Dion, and other really corny sort of music, and that's what you think Canadian music is.
All right.
And I guess Alanis Morissette's pretty cool. But Celine Dion, this group the Bare Naked Ladies, which you probably haven't heard of, but they're very big in Canada.
I've heard of them. Yeah, never listened.
Yeah, I don't recommend it. And then there was the pop punk era of Avril Lavigne, Sum 41. I was majorly into those things when they came out. So listening to this record when I was in high school in 2005, it was oh, Canadian music doesn't have to be corny as fuck. It. I think a friend told me about this, showed me a song, The CN Tower Belongs to the Dead, which, again, hearing, the CN Tower, in a song, that's that building downtown that you go to and you stand on the glass floor.
Yeah, I did that.
You did that, eh? Very scary.
Yeah. It is, yeah.
But yeah, so I think my friend had seen this song on a blog, probably music blog, MP3 blogs were very popular at that time in this sort of indie world, and showed it to me. And I was like, this is pretty cool. This is, I like the kind of whispery, kind of creepy, kind of gay vibe.
Right. Yeah.
And so I got into the record, and at this time I was also into other sort of soft, bookish kind of music, like Belle and Sebastian and that kind of thing. But hearing this, I was like, oh, okay, this is local. This feels very cool local music that someone, downtown is making in some cool place, which felt very exciting to me at the time.
What was it about it that then stuck with you? I thought this is a very, very interesting record. Like, feels like it definitely originates from a particular point in time, but I had a really good time with it. I mean, was there anything about it musically that, you know, I guess beyond being like the uncorny Canadian artist, like, what was it that really brought it out to you as like a cool record?
It's very catchy. Like there are a lot of earworms, and the lyrics sort of alternate between like ordinary personal concerns and like totally oblique kind of obscure things, which I found attractive. And I just found it, you know, it has a certain sound to it that was very unique when I first heard it, and I think still is. Yeah, he really has a way with melody. He can get a little bit, you know, not necessarily experimental in the sense of like screechy, skronky stuff, but there's, you know, some of the tracks have kind of, actually like with Monk, like there's a certain like rhythmic displacement in some of them. It's different, right? But it's very catchy at the same time. And also, I think at the time, like, someone doing music with a looping pedal was like very innovative.
Yeah.
So like his shows would all be like just like a solo violin and looping pedal. And also he just has a really pretty sort of mellow voice. So yeah, it just really appealed to me. And actually his first like 3 albums were all very important to me, and I had a hard time choosing which one, but I thought this one, like, since it was the first one that I heard, I would go with this. Nice.
And have you seen Owen live?
Honestly, it's a huge embarrassment that I haven't. But I hope to someday. And I mean, it's kind of, I almost feel weird being such a fangirl because, like, you know, like we have mutual friends. So it feels like if I met him, it would be like, what is happening? But it would also be extremely normal. So, but I didn't at the time, like, I don't know. I heard it when I was like 15 and 16 or whatever. So, you know, most shows were 19 plus, and I wasn't cool enough to have a fake ID or anything. And then, yeah, I don't know. It just never happened. But I've spent so much time with the records. And there are also like, there are a lot of like nice live recordings, like bootlegs that I've heard. And actually, just recently when I was like preparing for this podcast recording, I was just looking at a fan site that someone runs, and I saw that he performed at the Music Gallery, which is this Toronto like new music, experimental music institution. And it said Owen Pallett with Fred Frith and John Oswald. And I was like, what? This does not seem right. Like, but yeah, apparently he was like, at least at some point, he was doing some new music, experimental music kind of stuff as well.
Wow, that's
so it's
wild.
Interesting.
That's so cool. Owen's done like a bunch of string arrangement as well, right, for different artists.
That's right.
Yeah. Have you had much interaction with their string arrangements for other people?
I mean, certainly Arcade Fire was a big deal. You know, and all of those like Canadian indie rock people at the time, like Broken Social Scene, Feist, and then other more like local people. Also the Hidden Cameras. I think maybe Owen did some stuff for them as well. They're another kind of like queer Canadian indie band from that era. Yeah, I think his strings are so beautiful, especially on his orchestral record and his string quartet record, which are the second and third ones. They, just totally gorgeous tonality, you know. it's this weird mix of catchy and with dissonances and with different elements that yeah, it became a very important artist to me.
You mentioned the remaster, and I want to talk actually about the production, because one thing that strikes me about the production is the absence, for the most part, of very prominent reverb, which I think with strings quite as lush as this feels quite surprising. Like, it brings like a strange intimacy to a context that doesn't always carry it. And I have seen you. I'm sorry to bring this up. Maybe I think raking up like old tweets people have done is very bad practice. You did a tweet about reverb once, and I think the release you did on Hard Return had no reverb at all.
That's true.
Yeah. I think you said something like reverb is like vanilla essences to cooking, which stuck in my head because I use reverb like all the time. But like, you picking this record and it being something that has so little reverb, and knowing your music that I've heard doesn't have a lot of reverb, do you have like a, I don't know, like a particularly conscious relationship with that effect and reverb?
Well, I think I've gone back and forth on this. I do sometimes really quite like a very dry sound, but sometimes it doesn't work. And when I was mixing my new record with the help of an engineer, you know, they were saying like, you need more reverb. so guilty, I guess. But I do really like this sort of intimacy, and I have, you know, I don't have a loud voice, and neither does Owen. Like, the singing style is very intimate, and so when you put a big reverb on an intimate voice, it just sounds kind of strange.
Yes.
Because that's not how spaces work.
Right. Yes, for sure.
Although I will say, I am not anti-vanilla essence.
Sorry.
I actually am a big vanilla apologist, like vanilla ice cream all the way. So let's get that straight.
Excellent. Okay, Mira, let's go to your final input. Oh, hang on, sorry, I did want to ask one more question on the Owen one.
Yeah.
What do you have a favorite track on Has a Good Home?
I think probably either The Chronicles of Sarnia or Please, Please, Please. It's a tie between those two. Yeah, Chronicles of Sarnia just has a really pretty melody that sticks in your head. And Please, Please, Please has like this really cool like rhythmic thing going on where it feels like it's in an odd time. But I don't think it is. I think it's just this weird rhythmic thing, because I don't think it's very easy to use a looping pedal in an odd time.
That's interesting, because yeah, it always sounded really awkward, and I would try and like hum along in the car and get caught out by the syncopations. That's got some very odd, awesome backing vocals on it too, right? The like screaming.
Yeah. That's one where he does get loud. Yeah.
But we will never write you off. Your head is shouting, please, 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 please. Don't let your cock do all the work. All those around you, please, 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 please.
Mira, let's go to your final important album. So yeah, give me the name of it and then a little bit about why it's important to you.
So you task me with saying the name of the one that's in 2 foreign languages. That's fine.
Yeah.
This one is Koboku Senjû, and I believe it's Selektiv Hogst, something like that. I don't speak Norwegian.
That's the only one I had you say, wasn't it? That's bang out a line.
I see what's going on.
Great. So yeah, give me a little introduction as to why this one's important to you.
This one is actually the only one that I first heard on CD, buying it at a gig. this was probably like 2017, I want to say. My partner and I went to this Toshimaru Nakamura Martin Taxed gig, and they were supporting their duo album of no input mixer and microtonal tuba, playing all the hits, as you can imagine. And it was a really incredible concert. There was almost nobody there, which we felt like, are you kidding? Like, this is like one of the like legends of like maybe a very niche kind of music, but still a hugely important person. I don't know, maybe it wasn't well advertised or something, but it was a wonderful show. And we bought this CD there and a couple others because my partner is a huge CD collector, which I think I sing about on my record.
Yes,
And we were both totally stunned by this album that we bought. It, it's just a really beautiful blend of, the electronics, the guitar, and the winds, just the like interplay of different textures. And I wanted to choose a record that was more on the abstract or side of things. And this is the one I thought of because it became like we listened to it a lot on the stereo, and it just felt like you can really hear the sort of instant composition aspect. You can really hear the sort of, the great things about free improv, right? Like the non-hierarchical kind of interplay, the ensemble sound, the weird extended techniques, but also just like the spirit of collaboration, which is something that I love about this kind of music. And, it's also this as compared to the other two records, like there's something appealing about music that doesn't get stuck in your head. You know what I mean? You remember like the feeling of the music, but the song, there's not necessarily a song that gets stuck in your head to drive you insane like it does to me. So I really like that. I like that it has, aspects of noise without it being noise, right? Like I'm not a huge fan of like plain old vanilla extract harsh noise. I like dynamics and interplay and like tonality even sometimes, if I'm being good. So yeah, I thought this record just really exemplifies that kind of really beautiful ensemble electroacoustic improv sound that I like.
Nice. One really striking aspect of this is like how Toshimaru Nakamura appears within this music and like what he decides to do at any given moment. Like it's so, out of everyone who's playing, it's like the most upfront texture throughout the record tends to be, the no input feedback he's bringing to the table. So what's your, and in fact I think you've played on the same bill, right, as Nakamura before at Send and Receive. Like, what's your relationship like with Nakamura's music?
I mean, my partner introduced me to his music, and I started thinking, well, like, gee, I could do that. So the concept of the no input mixer as a way to make music was very appealing. And we happened to have like a sort of junky old mixer that we wired up and played around with, and that became a really important way in for me into playing music with people, like in a scene, feeling like a part of, like, contributing member of society, if you will.
Right.
And so, yeah, I love his work. I don't use the mixer the same way as him, I don't think, when I use it in an improv context. Like, I don't tend to do sort of like long tones and stuff like that. I have a bit more of a skronky thing that I do often. But it's true, it is very upfront on the mix, but it makes sense somehow.
Yes, totally.
And I don't know what there is to say about it other than it just kind of seems right. I mean, it's some of it is like, you know, this is kind of a frequency that you wouldn't ordinarily want to hear for a very long time. But
yeah.
But it works. I don't know. There's either you dig it or you don't, right? Like, it's like, it's one of those things.
Yeah. There feels to me like a bit of a wobbly tension there where it kind of sounds like it's protruding from the rest of the instruments. And I think that's because I'm habituated primarily to hearing acoustic improvisation, particularly when you've got, 4 musicians all playing acoustic instruments and then Nakamura and electronics.
Yeah.
You feel like it's an invasive, like someone's done at points, and I mean this as a compliment, like a doodle on a photograph where you're like, that wasn't there when this was being taken. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But that tension feels pretty, really exciting in the context of this album.
Totally. I mean, I will say, like, also as someone who plays with a lot of acoustic instruments as an electronic sound in the mix, sometimes it's really hard to get that balance just right. It can be really hard to not be too loud or too quiet, you know, because we don't have, like, our breath controlling it, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It does stick out, but, you know, it's not a sore thumb. It's like a very, very inviting thumb. It draws you in, right? And you listen to what is happening beneath it.
It made me think of I'm going to call it a solo on P-Pods, which I'm guessing is you, but
yeah,
how long did that take to nail? Because that's got this jovial energy to it, which totally matches the music, and then just that serrated electronic edge, which, yes, just nudging its way above what's happening. It's so cool. Did that take long to, like, get how you wanted it?
So that's interesting because that wasn't technically a no input mixer. That was this new toy that I got that's like a touch plate feedback synthesizer made by a company called Landscape. It's called the Stereo Field, and it, I tell you, greatly reduces the amount of stuff that I need to take to a gig. So
wow.
I'm very grateful for them. And I'm running that actually through Auto-Tune. So I decided, like, okay, I want to have this kind of abrasive sound for the solo. Actually, originally I was going to get trumpet, but the trumpeter couldn't do it. So I was like, all right, we're doing it live. And I decided to kind of fit it into the music a little bit by running it through an auto-tune in the right key, so that, you know, occasionally there is a note that you're like, oh yes, that is the same note as the guitar. So that it's not just totally out. I thought it turned out pretty good.
Yeah, love it. That's great. This Selektiv Hogst records, wonderful. It's really nice. I think obviously we've spoken about the no input. I love the contributions from, was it tuba and saxophone. Interestingly, we've had Espen Reinertsen, who's playing the sax on this record. One of his records got picked way back in, like, episode 12 of this podcast. It's very good. So cool. The solo stuff is very cool. I mean, it's all, like, most of it is reduced to what sounds like basically emulations of feedback, really, from those instruments, and, like, breath, which is really, really cool.
But then you have Tetsuya Akiyama playing this, like, really grounding acoustic guitar that just kind of makes musical sense of everything, and draws out the harmony in this really great way.
Yeah.
So you have everyone doing these kind of like weird extended techniques and breath and like flutter tongue and slap whatever they're slapping, keys, and then you have like the nice guitar. He's such a tasteful player, and it really balances out everything.
Mira, this has been ace. Thank you very much for prompting me to dive into these records. For your record too, which I will repeat is absolute corker. People, please check it out.
Wow, that's the first time anyone said that. Thank you.
And one other question I wanted to ask you is about what your relationship to listening to music looks like in terms of how you tend to buy music, in terms of format, where you go, where you listen to it. Yeah, tell me a bit about that.
Buying music, pretty much I only buy music on Bandcamp. Hopefully they don't bust the union and I don't have to stop doing that. Not impressed. But I listen to a lot of CDs because my partner has a serious CD collection and CD buying habit, which I get to be the beneficiary of. And I do not like vinyl. I find the surface noise very annoying, and I don't really get what all the fuss is about. Other than it's big, which bigger is better. Okay, fine. But yeah, I have tapes. I listen to them sometimes, but like sort of limited space, so we don't always have the cassette player set up. So, mostly I don't have any of the streaming services. I do use SoulSeek,
Nice.
which I highly encourage anyone. You don't need to pay Miles Davis's estate to listen to Kind of Blue. You can just get it on SoulSeek. It's fine.
True. Yeah.
And also just love going to hear people play music in person.
Is SoulSeek still like popping? Like, is there a lot of people using it? I mean, I used it back in really? Wow.
Oh yeah.
Oh, nice.
Totally. Yeah, you can find anything on there pretty much. But yeah, I mean, I certainly encourage people to support artists who need it.
Yeah. Well, Mira, thank you once again. It's been wicked speaking with you.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening, see you next time. Goodbye.